Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm Bailey Howard Leonard. I'm a board member with the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center. And I want to thank you for joining our live author stream with Pamela Terry. And a big thank you to Southwest 66 Credit Union for sponsoring our 2022 live streams. Hi, Pamela. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
How's the weather?
Hot.
Hot.
The air sort of melts all over you when you walk outside. It's
I
humid.
think that's the rules in the South.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. We
So
thank we're very grateful for our air conditioning, and we pray over it every night.
that's a very Southern thing and an
Yeah,
important thing to do.
absolutely.
Can you introduce yourself and tell our viewers a little bit about you?
Yes, my name is Pamela Terry. I wrote the book Sweet Taste of Muscadines. It was my debut novel. Came out on Valentine last March of 2021. And I live in a suburb of Atlanta called Smyrna, Georgia. I live here with my husband, who's a songwriter, and our two dogs, Andrew and George. George is laying on my feet at the moment. I have written pretty much all my life, but just professionally in the recent years. I had a blog for about 10 years that became really popular worldwide, to my surprise. And then I decided to try to write a novel, and it worked out well. And before that, I was an interior designer for about 10 years.
I would say that the novel writing worked out for you.
It did. It did. I
So
enjoy it tremendously, and I feel incredibly grateful that it did work out, because it gave me a chance to write another one, and that will be out next February.
oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into spoilers yet. I
Yeah.
do want to talk about the new book. So our primary focus is obviously adult literacy.
Right.
Why is adult literacy important to you?
Well, literacy is the key to the world. I mean, it's the key to magic. It's the key to everything. I can't. It's the difference between seeing and not seeing. I was very fortunate. I had a mother who taught me to read before I went to school. And he took me to the big Atlanta library every weekend, and I would leave with a stack of books. Um, the world is a hard place, and being able to read gives you an escape. It gives you perspective. It gives you windows into other people, other ideas, other thoughts. It just opens your world. And so I think it's one of the most important and vital things in humanity.
I
So,
love that.
yeah.
So you mentioned you started writing a blog before you
Mhm.
wrote the novel. You were writing a blog, but your love of storytelling is obvious through your book.
Yeah.
It must go back further than that. How did you start writing? What was your inspiration?
Well, I'm Southern, and we hear my husband and I were out to dinner last night, and we overheard the greatest conversation going in in the restaurant. And I told him that's what is so great about living here. You can just hear stories everywhere. Also, I was an only child, and so books were really important to me. And I can remember there was a big poplar tree in the back of our in our yard when I was little, and we lived right on the border of a big wood, a big, what they would call in Britain, a forest. And I learned how to climb that tree with a book. And I would go out into those woods with my dog and make up stories. And I think I just had an active imagination, and one that fortunately my parents encouraged. And so stories were always a part. I mean, I had a difficult time differentiating between the characters in the books and what was real life. I mean, I really thought that the people in Dickens, they really were real, and which was is just a wonderful way to spark your imagination. So stories, everything from sitting around the dinner table and listening to aunts and uncles and the older people in the family tell stories. From the new book I'm writing, which will be the third, I got in touch with a fellow who's in his 90s out in California because I'm writing about a certain area of California and a music club there. And this, I was a little reluctant to call this man. I got his number from a friend, and he had frequented that club in the 50s. And all I had to do was just ask him a couple of questions and the stories that came out. So, I mean, they're everywhere. You know, it's, you learn how to, once you train your ear and you begin to observe, the trick is capturing those stories. But if you listen, they're everywhere. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Southern families is when you get the older family members all
Oh,
telling
yeah.
the story,
Oh,
the
yeah.
differences, the slight differences that can cause little tiffs at the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about your story, and I
Yeah.
have it here.
Yes.
Can you
That's it.
tell our viewers a little bit about this book?
Absolutely. This book is a story of a woman. It's told in first person who left the South, I think 20 years previously, having a hard time dealing with some of the aspects of the South. Her father had died when she was young, and he was her linchpin to all things good. And when he died, her world changed. And so she got out as soon as she could, went to school in Rhode Island, became a professional knitwear designer, and moved to Maine. Her brother, her younger brother, did the same. He followed her to school in Rhode Island, and now he has an art gallery there. And one morning, she gets a phone call from her younger sister who stayed in their hometown of Wesleyan, Georgia. And the sister tells her that their mother, who was quite a formidable character, has been found dead in the muscadine arbor behind the family property. No one knows why. No one knows what she was doing out there because that was a place that she never went. So this necessitates the return of both Lila and Henry, her brother, to the town of Wesleyan, and which they really haven't returned to except for occasional Christmases, I think every other year since they left. And they meet their sister Abigail, who has basically stayed there, not only physically, but emotionally as well. And from there, they discover some secrets that have been long hidden, and it changes the course of everybody's life.
Can you read a selection for our
Yeah,
viewers from the
I'd
book?
love to. This is the part where Lila is going home and she's at the airport, and she and Henry have planned to meet up in the airport restaurant. And so she sees him from a distance. And this is what she thinks. It's really true that men age better than women. It had hardly been a year since I'd last seen my brother, but in that time he'd acquired a splash of gray just above his temples, a change guaranteed to send any woman straight to a salon, but one that only served to make Henry more attractive. He always managed to look both effortlessly casual and impeccably dressed simultaneously, and today was no exception. I smiled when I spotted the spectator brogues. Suddenly struck with a vague sense of recognition, I felt, if only for a moment, that I was gazing at nothing less than a reincarnation of Daddy. Age had not only gifted Henry with an unexpected amount of handsomeness, but it had also bestowed upon him an almost mirror image of our father. The sight dropped a pebble into my memories. They began to ripple through my mind. Henry finding me in the muscadine arbor the day I thought our mother had died. Henry's big dark eyes staring up at me as I read him a ghost story on a rainy night. Henry beside me at Daddy's funeral in his little gray suit. We had been preachers' kids, those creatures known to elicit both dread and envy in all who walk the hallways of the church. It's believed, and probably rightly so, that more than any other type of child, the offspring of pastors, preachers, vicars, priests, any religious authority really, are somehow more mischievous, more prone to the sort of trouble that thrives in the warm environment of constant attention and tacit forgiveness. Maybe this is deserved. Certainly Henry did his best to fit that description. The Christmas he was 9, the church decided to retire the old blow mold creche that had sat on its front lawn every December since before my parents were born, and instead have a live nativity scene, complete with all the requisite animals assembled around a holy family that would include 6-month-old Fletcher McClatchy as its baby Jesus. Naturally, this was cause for much excitement in the congregation, not to mention in the McClatchy family. Unbeknownst to anyone, however, late on the afternoon of the first performance, Henry had sneaked into the enclosure and untied the pair of quietly dozing camels. During the event later that night, no one seemed to notice the huge creatures shuffling farther and farther away from their designated positions until just as the children's choir began its wobbly rendition of O Holy Night, they made their break for freedom. Not a soul there will ever forget the sight of several of Wesleyan's finest, along with Joseph and the three wise men, chasing those two galloping camels up the middle of Second Avenue. They were almost to the highway before they were caught. Few people found humor in the situation at the time, but I remember wishing with all my heart that Daddy had still been pastor. He would have laughed for days. As a child, whenever I thought about God, he had my father's face. Watching him standing tall in the pulpit on Sunday mornings, washed in a celestial light that streamed in through the necklace of tall stained glass windows, speaking the words of Jesus, joy, love, forgiveness. It was easy for a little girl to confuse the two. Daddy was speaking of God, but he himself was the corporeal embodiment of all those things to me. And when he died, he took God with him. I turned all my attention towards watching over my little brother, whose heart I knew was at least as broken as mine. Abby was too small to realize much of what it meant when we told her Daddy would never be coming back home. He'd already been gone 2 years when he died, and to a little girl like Abby, that's pretty much forever anyway. So there you go.
I love that, Henry.
Yeah, he's great. He's my favorite character. Of course, I like Abigail a lot too.
I see him for me. It's Henry or Lila,
Yeah,
or Dot.
I love Dot. Dot was the only character in the book who was based on a real person. Dot,
Really?
yeah, Dot was basically a client that I had several years ago, who I did her house when I was doing design. And she was in her 80s at the time, but she was that was Dot. I mean, down from where she looked, the way she looked, to her attitudes, her compassion, everything. That dialogue could have just come right out of her mouth. And
I
she
love
passed
that.
away. She actually passed away on election day in 2016. And I think this was my way of bringing her back for me
And
to write
honoring
about.
her.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolute honor. She was just even just there for a brief amount of time, but so lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that
Pamela,
pretty
what
much
do you
that
hope?
pretty much says her life. She was here for a brief amount of time, but so lovely. Yeah. That was her.
What do you hope is the biggest takeaway from this novel for readers?
Well, I've been asked that before, and I think for me, the linchpin of the book is the line. I think Henry says it, or he prompts it in Lila, which living your life with joy is a form of forgiveness. And I think that to me is the theme of the book. It's easy to forgive when someone does something to you, like insults you or something like that. It's harder to forgive an attitude that persists, and that's harder. And to live your life with joy is in a way of letting that go past you. And I do think it's a form of forgiveness to be who you are and live with joy. I do think that means you've moved past. And to me, that's the theme of the book.
So for me, what really stood out after reading the book, because I live in Texas, I also live in the South,
Right.
was this love-hate relationship that
Mm-hmm.
Southerners that feel a little bit different when they're growing up in the South, this love-hate relationship that they have. And pardon my pun, but those roots run very deep. And I think you really, really nailed that. And I think you captured that feeling of the fear of coming home and it not changing at all, and then the fear of home also changing past what you know it to be.
Right.
I think that those are very Southern things, and
Yeah.
that's what I felt when I was reading the book. I just thought,
I'm glad because that's what I intended. You know, people ask me sometimes, are you a Southern writer? And there is a category of Southern writer, and it's difficult to find that offensive when you look at who's on that list. Flannery O'Connor and Eudora Welty and William Faulkner and Pat Conroy. I mean, the list goes on. And I think the reason we have our own genre is because of that difficulty of living here and growing up here, especially. If you are a thinking person and you are a feeling person and you grow up in the South, you see that dichotomy play out every day. And it is a struggle to make sense of that. Those of us who have chosen to stay, we have to make sense of that. And we have to, there's no way to really make peace with it, but you have to acknowledge it. And you have to, I don't think you can make it better until you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And it's painful and it's ongoing, as I'm sure if you read the news, how to acknowledge our history and not honor the bad parts of our history and move forward into a way that is workable for everybody.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard. And I think one of the reasons there is a Southern genre is because we're all working it out. And, you read Flannery O'Connor, her books were brutal. And that was her trying to work it out and to see where grace fit in this Southern landscape. She once said, I write to know what I believe, or something like, I don't know what I believe until I write it down. And I think that's true. We work it out on paper and we try to make sense of it. She also said Southerners write about freaks because we can still recognize one, which I know what she means. I know what she means. So I'm glad you felt that way because that was my intention.
Yeah, no, it was really nice because I felt different growing up here in the South, and there's not a ton of outlet for that. I want to talk about one of your outlets, which is Scotland.
Yeah.
What inspired the love of Scotland? It's mentioned in the book. I understand that you love going to Scotland now.
Yeah, I'm going back in September. I can't wait. I had enough miles to use my miles, and I'm going. We're going back in September. I tell you, I went to Scotland for the first time, I guess 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And I had always been intrigued by Scotland. My ancestry is Scottish. My mother was a MacDonald and my father was a McCain. His mother was a McCain, and we have Sinclairs, and so I knew that on paper. Didn't mean anything to me. And I can still remember when we crossed over into the Highlands and we got out of the car in front of the Three Sisters at Glencoe. I felt a feeling I had never felt before. It was like somebody had reached inside and just yanked a cord. And I talked to this lady who ran an inn that we used to stay at in Florida. I've talked to her about that. And she said, oh, dear, that was ancestral memory. And I thought at the time, well, that seems crazy. But I think it was because I have never felt more at home anywhere than I do there. Once I get in the Highlands of Scotland, I feel a connection that I don't feel here. And I talked to another friend about that, and he said he has felt that. He was Scottish, and he said, I felt that way in Scotland and in Africa. And he said, if you think about it, we all come from Africa. Yeah. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I just, if I can live and go back there every year, I'm okay. If I can't go back there, then I'm just antsy as can be. I have to get back. Yeah.
Well, I love that you're going to be there in September.
Me too. We're going to try this year to get to St. Kilda, which is a little archipelago off the coast of the Outer Hebrides. It's about 2 hours out, and it's notorious for making people sick when they go the trip out because the little boat only takes 8 people. And we've tried this will be the 3rd year, but the weather, it's very dependent on the weather and the tides because there's no dock and you have to scramble out. It's uninhabited now, but it was inhabited until the 40s when people just couldn't make a living anymore. So I've been dying to go, and we're going to try again this year. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I'm hoping this is the year.
Yeah,
I want to follow up with you on that
sure.
after September.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about spoilers. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but
No, no,
there
no.
are a lot of twists and turns and unexpected and joyful surprises in this novel. Do you have those when you're doing that? Do you have those all planned out in your
No.
pre-writing, or do they come to you organically as you're writing another section? You think, oh, I know what will be.
I am one of those writers who writes to discover. I am really not a plotter. I'm not someone who sits down and does a long outline. To me, that would be like homework. I know what's going to happen, and I just have to go in today and fill that in. That's like homework. The joy of writing to me is discovery, and I've told this story before. But I was in the middle of another novel when I was cooking dinner one night, and the first line of this novel just ran through my head like a news crawl on CNN. And I remember it came out of nowhere, and I took whatever it was I was cooking off the stove and went and sat down and wrote the prologue. And through all the edits and all the revisions, that prologue never changed. But I just took that and followed it. And I had no agenda. I had no idea where the story was going. And I can remember writing one line in the book about a character who dies, and when I was sitting at the library, because I sneak off there sometimes to write, and I wrote that line and just sat back and thought, oh, I didn't see that coming. So it's that discovery that is the most fun for me in writing. And I've just started a new book. I took a few weeks off. I just turned in my second, and that'll be out next year. And I'm now starting a new one, and that's the most fun process. I'm getting the characters on the page, and I don't know what they're going to do. So it's fun. So no, I didn't know where I was going.
So, what can we expect from
Mhm.
the next novel? What's next? What's coming out next?
The next novel is called When the Moon Turns Blue, and it comes out on February 21st, I think, somewhere
Okay.
around in there. It is about what happens. It's in the same city. It's in the same city of Wesleyan, but a group of different people. And it's what happens when an ice storm hits unexpectedly, in the town, and how everything is thrown off kilter, and some strange things happen involving a Confederate statue. So
Okay. Well, we'll be
yeah.
looking for that in February. If people want to know more, how do they find you? Do you have a website, Instagram, Twitter?
PamelaTerry.net, which is my website. I don't update it as often as I probably should. And you can also find me on the Random House website.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Pamela. Check out her website. Hopefully, we'll get an update in September if she is able
Yeah.
to take the treacherous boat journey.
Yes.
Um, the novel is available now.
Yes.
So if you want to purchase this, it is available on Amazon. Is it available on your website?
I think there's a link on my website. You can also get it at bookshop.org, which connects to all the independent bookstores in the country.
Perfect. Support an independent bookshop. If you
Absolutely.
do want to support Amazon, please be sure and shop at smile.amazon.com and select the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center as your foundation of choice.
Perfect.
Thank you again to Southwest 66 Credit Union for making all of this possible. And please don't forget that the readathon is going on, and you do still have time to sponsor a student in their reading goals. And as Pamela said earlier, their quest to get the keys to the kingdom.
That's right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.